Hey movement leaders, in this video I want to share with you 3 ingredients that make small groups effective. I was making pancakes a couple of weeks ago with Sarah, and I decided on accident that I was going to use baking soda instead of baking powder. And as you can imagine, it was terrible. Well, like a recipe, we want to make sure that we lead our small groups in a way that we're not leaving out any necessary ingredients. A pancake without sugar tastes terrible. Bread without flour just isn't going to happen, right? And a pizza without sauce, well, that's just weird, okay? And just like recipes call for certain and specific ingredients, so we want to make sure that we are leading our small groups in ways that we're utilizing the right ingredients. First, we want to be present. Your primary goal as a Connect group leader is to connect students to Christ. The first step of this happening is you being there consistently. For our students, that means weekly. And while that's our bare minimum ask, is that you be there on either Sundays or Wednesdays, depending on the role you serve, this is also the most important thing that you do. It's the most important time that you have with your students. You can't lead a Connect group without community, and you certainly can't build community without trust. And trust allows for open conversation, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that if your students don't trust you, then they won't talk to you. Trust also allows for transparency, right? Students need a place where they can be genuine and authentic and transparent about what it is that they're going through, what they're struggling with, and what they need help with in their life. Without trust, those kinds of things never happen. Trust is the prerequisite for transformation. We want students to transform the world, but for that to happen, they first must be transformed themselves. And the only way that happens is through establishing a circle of trust. The first step in your group beginning to trust you is by you being there on a consistent basis. But here's the thing. We're not just talking about simply punching the clock and showing up for duty, right? We are talking about showing up full of energy, attentive and eager to listen and set the tone for your group. It's one thing for you to be present physically, but it's an entirely different thing for you to be there present physically and mentally. And you know this because you've had students who were there physically but totally checked out, right? And if that's frustrating for us as leaders, imagine how students feel when we lead with no enthusiasm, no zeal, no passion for God's word. No, we want to be contagious with our passion for God's word and for God's people. I've said it before, I'll say it 1,000 more times. Students don't need someone with all the right answers. They just need someone that they know will show up. Be that, and Jesus will take care of the rest. But this showing up or being present must, and again, hear me say must happen more than just once an hour, once a week. And this is where you get to be creative with relationships, right? Write your students a card, send them an encouraging text or prayer, invite them to come over for a movie night or take them out, right? If they're involved in clubs or sports, show up there in your life. There's an overwhelming amount of evidence that suggests the more we connect with students relationally at church, the greater the likelihood they'll stay connected to church after high school. Nearly 75% of students who say they had a small group leader invested in their life more than just during regularly scheduled at church events say that they attended church after high school. That's 3 out of 4. Now, obviously, we want 4 out of 4, 100%, right? But what we know is that being invested, being present matters. Being present in the lives of students is foundational for leading effective groups. Number 2, we want to be prepared. Now listen, I get it. Life is busy. We have great intentions of sitting down with the lesson and poring over it, right, for hours before Sunday, and then boom, all of a sudden it's Saturday night or even Sunday morning, and you're just scrambling to read over at one time. Again, I get it. I can't tell you how many times I've done that myself, and confession time still do from time to time. And let me just tell you, that's okay. Again, I get it. But just like I challenge myself, let me challenge you to avoid this as much as possible. Set an hour or two aside at some pre-designated time throughout the week to really pour over your lesson, pour over the material, ingrain it in your mind. And why? Why would we want to do that? Because it's one more way that we can demonstrate to students that we love them. You say, Jackson, how is that? Well, by being prepared, we are communicating to them the importance of what happens during our Connect group time. right? By being prepared, we are demonstrating that this is a priority. By being prepared, we are showing them the value of studying God's Word. Imagine showing up to church and the pastor or the band just winging it, right? That that might be okay one Sunday. You might let it slide. But if it's week after week, at some point, you're going to feel like, well, if they don't take it seriously, then why should I take it seriously? It's the same concept, right? You showing up prepared communicates that what happens during that time is important. But not only are we showing them that we love them, but we're also doing ourselves a favor, right? You say, Jackson, how's that? Well, by being prepared, when we're prepared, when we know the big idea that we want to communicate, when we're familiar with the questions that we want to ask, when we're comfortable with the opening activity or the closing thoughts, we are more flexible in allowing for conversation to take us down unexpected paths, but still confident that we can get it back on track. Think of yourself like a quarterback. Right? And your small group, let's just say they're the defense, right? When you're so familiar with your plays, that is your lesson material, when you see the defense shifting and the conversation headed down a different path than what you anticipated, you can call an audible, right? You can make an adjustment and allow for those conversations to happen while still executing the lesson in a way that leads to a touchdown, right? And you know that there's no greater feeling than leaving a small group time knowing that the material stuck, the conversation was great, it was organic, it just flowed, that truth was communicated in a meaningful way, that application was made for their lives, and students are equipped and excited for the week ahead of them. What do we need to do? First, we must be present. Second, we must be prepared. And third, we must be patient. Listen, if you're like me, the light bulb moments are what keep you going, right? Those moments where it just clicks for a student for the first time, where a student understands for the first time something new about who God is, what He's done for us, and or what He's calling us to do now, right? Those moments fire me up. But those moments probably aren't going to happen every single time you meet together, right? It takes patience and it takes perseverance. Patience in the off-topic, unnecessary comments, right? Patience in the awkward silence when you ask what you think is a pretty easy question, right? Patience in the rabbit trails about farts or boyfriends. Patience in the perpetuated mistakes made by the same person. You have to have a conversation with them 18 different times. Patience in the immaturity. Patience in this projected indifference that teenagers give off so often. Patience in the day in, day out grind that is loving and leading teenagers. Peter followed the flesh and blood Jesus for 3 years and still put his foot in his mouth on several occasions. This thing called discipleship, it takes patience. But I promise you it's worth it. Let me remind you of what Paul says to the church in Corinth. He says, I planted and Apollos watered, but it was God who gave the growth. Leaders, if you want to lead your groups effectively, let me challenge you to do this. 1, be present during regularly scheduled group time and throughout the week. Be present in their lives. Be prepared. Know what you want to communicate and be ready to pivot when things go down a different path. And lastly, be patient. God is working through you, I promise, and the payoff is worth it.